From sacrifice to triumph, a story that spans over 50 years.
I said, my wife's wedding ring. He said, what? I said, well, my wife's wedding ring. He said, she going to be all right with that? I said, yeah, I think she will be.
From spite to success, a story that is deep as a holler and spans a lifetime of hounds that have been life-changing, and some may say even a breed-changing group of hounds.
Absolutely. I just kind of was, those two guys, those two programs were on top, and I like their dogs, and I just really the clone an old thing, the wheel wasn't broke, so I didn't try to fix it. I just tried to, just improve on what I was doing, and really from about 1994 until a gentleman showed up and said I couldn't win a coon hunt with these old-fashioned dogs. For about 25 years, I coon hunted with my son, raised him, but I never even got a Coonhound magazine. So I just kind of sat here and did my own thing and really was kind of shut out from the whole outside world. And I'd have to do a little thinking of when that was, when kind of decided to come back in, but had a dog pup born. He was the only pup that lived. His name was Willow Creek Golden Booker. And after a couple litters, I told Keelan, I said, this dog's going to be the best reproducer we've ever had. This dog's got it going. And that's kind of what got me back into going to the competition hunts. And
this is your host, Jason Snellgrove, and I will be your guide as we journey down the road to pleasure hunt or hitting the long trail to those great comp hunts. This is the Coonhound Collective podcast. All right, welcome to the Coonhound Collective podcast today. Today is an interview I've looked forward to for a long time. Me and this gentleman have spoken on the phone a few times and finally got it worked out to get together, and that is none other than Mr. John Anderson. Mr. John, how's it going today?
Going good, Jason. I appreciate you doing the podcast with you.
Oh, man, I've been looking forward to it. I talked to Keelan, and me and him's text kind of back and forth some, and I've been looking forward to this and want to hear about these dogs that y'all have had, and y'all have done some impressive things over the years, and just look forward to hearing about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and kind of how you got into coon hunting?
Well, I live in a ranch and farming community in northeast Nebraska. I'm about 90 miles west of Sioux City, Iowa, and about 65 miles south of Yankton, South Dakota. And we live right on top of the Ogallala Aquifer. I got my start in coon hunting at a young age. I grew up in a place that is kind of rare these days. We had about 100 acres of cottonwood trees on the farm we lived on, and so lots of coons naturally. And I was about somewhere 5 or 6 when my daddy took me and my brother, asked if we wanted to go hunting. The chief of police from a little town called Plainview had some black and tans, and I guess that was my first introduction to coon dogs, and just had a love of dogs my whole life, and just kind of grew up with a love of dogs, and that kind of stuck with me. And I was into bird dogs, probably in my grade school years and early high school, and did a fair amount of spotlighting there when I was probably about 12, and turned 13. Then I told my buddy I was going to go buy a coonhound from a guy named Vernon Hoshide, who was a Major League Baseball coach. Sure, if some of your listeners look it up, he's got a pretty impressive record. Got 5 World Series rings, and he was just like a dad to me. I went to Vern. Friend said, you'll never be able to afford a dog from Vern. And I said, well, I'm going to go talk to him anyway. And he said, how much money you got? And I said, 25. He said, I just happen to have a dog for $25. So that was my introduction to owning my first very own coon dog. And I think I was about 13 years old, and took that dog hunting, and he really didn't want to hunt. I went back to Vern and said, I'm having a hard time getting anything done with Duke. You won't go hunting? He said, well, he's used to going with another dog. You need to buy Bugle from me. Bugler was that dog's name, Blue Dog. I said, well, how much is he going to cost? He said, $10 and pay me whenever you get it. So those were the two dogs I got, and I really caught more skunks and coons, but I thought they were really good. Had the old steel flashlight that the cops used to have with a piece of twine tied to each end hanging around my neck, and that was the first light, and I really thought I was something. But that would have been my earliest owning my own hounds and getting an introduction, and Vern was a great mentor to me, and we had a lot of fun hunting over the years together.
Now, was those English dogs, or were they, what kind of dogs were they?
They were just great dogs. My first introduction, Jason, to English dog is I just worried my mom to death to take me to a coon hunt. And I remember somebody gave me a couple full cries, and boy, I was just wanting to go to a coon hunt. And so I finally got her talked into taking me to a club here close by. Excuse me. And she dropped me off, and she said, now what time will you be done? And I said, I have no idea, but I'll and I'd made arrangements. One of the club members said they'd take me home. So I hunted grade that night, but by a chance meeting, there was a gentleman there with some English coonhounds, and it was a gentleman by the name of Roger Preheim who owned the Turkey Ridge Kennels, and he would have been the prefix namesake on Turkey Ridge Racket that was later owned by Bert Noney. And he had a big tri-colored English male pup, and I bought him, and I guess that's kind of been a stock of dogs that I started. I think I bought him in 1976, I believe. And so that was my first really registered English coon dog, and I've hunted English ever since.
So that first pup there that you got, is your stuff still go? Is that where you started your breeding stock with, or did you kind of move through some dogs before you kind of found what suited you?
No, really, tell you in a roundabout way. I finished that dog to night champion, dual champion. And of course, you got to remember, a young kid. I don't remember. I must have been about 15, 16 years old. And one of my earliest memories of I was just on cloud nine. The Nebraska State hunt was at Staplehurst. And Mr. Ed Loomis, that owned Loomis's Tom, the first UKC world champion, was the bench show judge. And I won best male of show and Nebraska State bench show champion. Oh, man, was I really happy. So I finished that dog to night champion, and his first night champion cast, I was hunting in Canton, South Dakota, and this dog had never climbed, but it was a tree that was hanging out kind of over the river, but the water had receded. Long story short, he was up there, and when he went to turn around, he fell out of the tree on the James River bottom. And I carried that dog out of there about 1.5 miles. And of course, Saturday night, young kid, I didn't know where, you just couldn't get vets like you can now, and brought him home. And I was married. He must have been about a 4-year-old dog then, about 1981. And I'll never forget it. A Sunday, my wife and I was really labored breathing, didn't seem to have any broken bones, but long story short, he had broken his diaphragm from the fall and basically suffocated. And I tell you what, I'm not afraid to admit I just cried like a baby. And that dog got up, walked over, laid down, put his head in my lap, and gasped a couple times and died. And I tell you what, I just my whole coon hunting world had come to an end, and I just, I was done. I mean, there'd never be another one like him, And so I had made arrangements with another gentleman named Lloyd Drent to raise a litter of pups that was a Nebraska fella that moved to Oklahoma and bred to a full litter mate brother to Penny's Dancing Disco, and they called this dog was Green Valley Double D. His nickname was Dan. I made the deal, so I wasn't going to back out of it. I really didn't feel like doing it anymore, but my wife and I, we borrowed my father-in-law's Galaxy 500 station wagon and put a big dog crate in the back of it for the puppies, and didn't have two dimes to rub together. We stopped at a rest stop and just slept in the back of that station wagon and got down to Lloyd's, and I didn't know how hot it could be in northeast Oklahoma, and it was about June, I guess, but it was sure sultry. He said, Donnie Lamb has a big red tick male brother, the Disco dog, and Dan, he said, he's thinking about selling him. You want to go look at him? And I hem-hawed around, and my wife, I got to give her a gut. She said, no, let's go look at him. I said, all right, we'll go look at him. And I'll never forget it. That dog pounded out of the dog box, and a big red tick dog, and just like that, in the blink of an eye, I had the fire back to coon hunt. So I just love that dog. And Donnie said we go hunting that night. So you got to remember, I'm a farm boy from northeast Nebraska. When Donnie said, well, we'll go down to Dead Man Holler, he said even the natives don't like to hunt down there. And he said it's full of snakes and ticks, but there is some coons. So we went down there, and that dog was really impressive. But what impressed me the most is he had a mouth that was just unreal. People talk about it yet today. I've never duplicated it. Don't know if I'll ever live long enough to have another dog like that with that kind of mouth, but it was really impressive. And we got back, and I said to Donnie, what do you think you want for him? Well, he said $2,500. And of course, I told you we're just a newlywed couple, and I didn't have no money. So I said, well, let me go home and think about it, and I'll get a hold of you this week sometime. And so we got back to Lloyd's the next morning, Sunday morning. We loaded up all them pups, and we came back to Nebraska. So that was kind of the story of how I got. The next story I'm about to tell you is you'll probably find very interesting.
And before you move to that story, this would probably been in the early 80s, I'm assuming?
This was about 1981.
Yeah, so $2,500 was a heap of money.
It was a heap of money for a dog then, yeah.
Especially a newlywed couple.
So I know in the heart of my heart, I don't have that kind of money. I mean, I'm borrowing my father and mother-in-law's station wagon to go get them pups. So, try laughing. I was a real country bumpkin, Joe. My mom and dad were sharecroppers, and they hardly ever went to the bank. But I thought, well, I'll go see the banker. That's what you do when you need some money. So I went in there, and the receptionist said, "Can I help you, John?" I said, "Well, could I see Mr. Fox?" And she said, "Yeah, just take a seat." So she said, "Okay, Mr. Fox is ready to see you." And I went in there and sat down, and never forget, he had one of them roller chairs, they roll around. And he leaned forward, he had rings on, and he clicked the top of that desk. He said, "What can I do for you, young feller?" I said, "Well, Mr. Fox," I said, I need a loan." He said, "Well, that's what we do here. What do you need this loan for?" Well, I said, "I want to buy a coonhound." He said, "A coonhound?" "Yeah, I want to buy a coonhound." He said, "Well, how much do you need for this coonhound?" When I said $2,500, he just rolled that chair back and threw his arm straight up in the air, looked up the ceiling, said, "My gosh, what kind of a dog is this?" So I said, "Well, he's a pretty nice young dog." And I mean, you got to remember, I'm living in northeast Nebraska now. Granted, them was still the heydays of coon hunting here, but it wasn't like, people, grew up in that culture, is what I'm saying. It's not like probably Missouri or Illinois, or, the traditional coon hunting states, Kentucky, whatnot. So he said, what do you got for collateral? Well, I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I can't possess a coon dog. I wouldn't know if that dog's worth $25 or $25, but I need something that's worth something that we can take, that we can sell if you don't pay us back. I said, well, we got a new washer and dryer we got for a wedding. He goes, oh my goodness. He said, I'm not taking a newlywed's, your couch and your furniture and stuff. Do you have anything? Can you think of anything else? I said, yeah. I said, my wife's wedding ring. He said, what? I said, well, my wife's wedding ring. He said, she going to be all right with that? And I said, yeah, I think she will be. He said, well, she's all right with it. You're going to have to take that wedding ring to 3 different jewelers and get it appraised. And if it appraised for enough, he said, I'll loan you the money. And so I got home and told my wife, and without hesitation, she took it to some jewelers in Norfolk, Nebraska. And the ring appraised right around $2,500. And I took the appraisals back, and the banker gave me a cashier's check for $2,500 and took my wife's wedding ring, and she never got it back for 3 years.
Oh, wow. So they literally held that sucker for collateral.
They literally held it. I put the dog on a 3-year note payments. It took me 3 years to pay him off monthly payments. And then she got her ring back, and
wow.
Still married to her today. But it's a tribute to my wife of what, she knew I loved that dog and knew I loved coon hunting. And so that dog is the base of what we started with. And he was a Platte Valley dog. And his mother was a half sister to Whittle Sandman, a dog that Bert Noney got from James Whittle back in right around in the mid 80s. So that was kind of the start. So I took that dog as a 2-year-old and brought him to Nebraska, and finished him to a dual grand. Tremendous nose on the dog. But what I wanted, I'm going to skip around a little bit here. So the dog that fell out of the tree was by Turkey Ridge Racket out of a female called Turkey Ridge Old Queen. And Queen came from an old gentleman in Yankton, South Dakota. She was a red and white tick female and really good. She won the South Dakota state hunt and Nebraska state hunt. And so I knew I wanted to get some of that. Well, a close friend of mine, Doug Savadas, had a littermate sister to Wishbone. I called that dog Sundown's Blue Wishbone that fell out of the tree and died. And so the Racket dogs, Racket was the son of Oney's Drum by Van Zant Sam. And the Racket dogs were just tremendous at winding coons and running with their head up. And of course, the Platte Valley dogs, the Stagners, were more noted for running with their nose down and grinding tracks out. And so I wanted to incorporate that and put a little more winding ability. And so that's kind of the route I went over the years, and I've really kept that same bloodline over the years.
Now, was you buying females, or was you just promoting him at stud and people were bringing females? You were just taking pups off of it, or how did you get going there with the female side?
Well, the female side, I used Lady, which Doug only lived about 40 miles from me. And then the next female that was real instrumental in our kennel, I bought a blue female. As far as I know, it was the only, she was a littermate sister to Perk's Northern Cujo, one of Bert's last stud dogs. And she was a blue female, and she was out of Racket, and her mother was out of a dog called Rice's Buck, and he was a dual grand out of Van Zant Sam. So she was line bred Van Zant Sand, top and bottom, and then a shot of a dog that Bird always said probably was his best coon dog, a dog named Joe's Red Pepper. And so she was her mother was a Bryce's buck crossed on a Joe's Red Pepper. So that's what and I would run some ads, still dig out some of the cooners and full cries. We did some advertising, but I mean, I could only afford an ad, and then it'd take me months to get it paid off. And like I said, Northeast Nebraska just really isn't a metropolis to try to run a stud dog. So we kind of just banked on them two females, and we put a little bit of Randy and Rick Thielen lived in Iowa, and Randy came over and hunted one night, and they bred a chip to Bugle and hunted with Son, and so the only hard time spec we've got in our dogs would be go back to hard time Son of the Thielens. And so if you really lay one of our pedigrees down, our dogs are just heavily line bred top and bottom. We did a lot of nieces to uncles and had lines within lines, and just probably in the last 10 years did some outcrossing.
Yeah. So that was the start of basically your start of the Willow Creek line, right?
Yeah, I would say the start of the base of our line would be Burton Oney's dogs and Kelly Stagner's, the Platte Valley and the Oneys.
So where did that name come from, Willow Creek?
Well, we live about 3 miles from the Willow Creek.
Okay, so it's literally named after a creek there close to you.
Yeah, named after a creek, and we're Willow Creek Quarter Horses and Willow Creek Cattle Company, and
okay,
that's a whole nother avenue we could go down. I think people would, but I have a whole nother avenue of being a young kid going to Bert Oney's place in Ohio, but that'd be for another one. But that was an interesting deal as a kid looking up to Bert Oney and going to his place. I think I probably made 3 to 4 trips with Roger Preheim to Bert's, because when Roger sold Racket, he had lifetime breeding to Racket. And part of the deal was Roger got 4 litter mate sisters out of Hot Shot Red, Maggart's Hot Shot Red. And then when them chips, they kind of synchronized themselves. When 2 or 3 of them were in heat, or one in heat, one coming in, Roger would pack up and go to Greenwich, Ohio, and spend a week and a half with Bert getting them females bred. So it's a great. I think I was probably about 16 years old the first time I went to Mr. Oney's place, and I just really treasure those memories, and had some great mentors when I was younger in the English breed.
Yeah, I would say so. And would you say they probably helped or influenced you in how you've bred up to today?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just kind of was, those two guys, those 2 programs were on top, and I like their dogs, and I just really, the cloning old thing, the wheel wasn't broke, so I didn't try to fix it. I just tried to, just improve on what I was doing. And really from about 1994 until a gentleman showed up and said I couldn't win a coon hunt with these old-fashioned dogs. For about 25 years, I coon hunted with my son, raised him, but I never even got a Coonhound magazine. So I just kind of sat here and did my own thing, and really was kind of shut out from the whole outside world. And I'd have to do a little thinking of when that was, when kind of decided to come back in, but had a dog pup born. He was the only pup that lived. His name was Willow Creek Golden Booker. And after a couple litters, I told Keelan, I said, this dog's going to be the best reproducer we've ever had. I said, this dog's got it going. And that's kind of what got me back into going to the competition hunts. And I just hope a lot of young guys realize just nothing happens overnight, but if you believe in what you got and you stick with it, things can happen.
And now you mentioned Booker. Is that the dog that we talked about on the phone that was on the reproducers list and all?
Yeah. Booker is, I don't want to talk out of turn, but I think he's got a record that might not, I haven't checked into this, but I know there's another dog, but he's approaching, he's got 201 pups. Let me back up. He was a PR dog that never went to a coon hunt. And in northeast Nebraska. And I think there was only 3 outside bitches because we just really don't stand our dogs to outside females anymore. And so I think the other day a guy finished one. There's a couple more, but I think he's right at 10%. I think he's got like 20 champions out of 201 pups, and half of them are Grand Nights.
Yeah, and this dog, like you said, is never had a title put on it, right?
No.
Right, yeah.
No, I think he got on the reproducers list when he was 3 years old, and I think he was on it his whole lifetime then, somewhere in the top 10.
Yeah. I knew you had told me that story, and I wanted you to tell that on here because I thought that was pretty interesting that, for a lack of better words, people go after the flavor of the month of what's winning or what's titled or, whatever. And I understand people want to breed to winners and to produce winners, but for that dog to never be in a hunt and never have, I guess, especially living where you live, the exposure that some other dogs have to accomplish that was quite an accomplishment, I thought.
Yeah, I don't take any. The good Lord just blessed us with that dog. We've got a little bit of semen put up, but he was just a blessing from the good Lord. There's no other way. It's just hard for me at my age to reflect back. This all started because an unselfish bride donated or pledged her wedding ring to get this all started. It's almost an unreal story. And to expand that Booker story a little bit, a son of his placed 11th in the 2018 World Hunt. And it was about 30 miles, Mount Gillen, it was about 30 miles from Bert Oney's kennel. And so it was just, took a few years, but I mean, really, I don't know if I could have written a better story myself. And what was really rewarding, it was a dog that was Willow Creek top and bottom for nearly 5 generations, at least 5 generations. And it's what I believed in. It's what I started with, and it's what I'm still hunting today. And that dog and some others prove that they can still win in the hunts.
Yeah. And the dog you referenced there, is that Bull?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, we're talking about coon dogs and your life of coon hunting and all this stuff, but we might need to be talking to you about how to pick out a wife. It sounds like to me.
Yeah, well, it's in today's world, it's just I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many flowers my wife has had dug up and stuff chewed up, and she left something set there and the pups got a hold of it. I mean, any coon hunter can only imagine, or coon hunter's wife, of what goes on when you raise puppies and let them run around.
Yeah, I don't know that mine would pawn her wedding rings, but I will say I have a really good wife, and I can't tell you how many dead chickens I picked up from a hound getting loose, and her chickens are her pride and joy. And stuff strode everywhere and always having to pick it up and stuff like that she's put up with. And those wives that stand behind you that are, good coon hunter wives, they're worth a gold mine for sure.
They are. We celebrated our 43rd wedding anniversary. I met my wife when she was 15, and actually a little bit, brag on her a little more, when I was away at college, she took care of some of my coonhounds when she was still in high school. So, yeah, I knew she was a keeper right away, and we're still doing it today. I mean, we had a dog, Grand Night champion, dual Grand Night champion, Willow Creek Gus, and he was from a litter of 14, and the mother was a Platte Valley. She had Platte Valley right on her papers. I got from a good friend of mine, Jesse Wheeler, down at St. Joe. And she got septic with all them puppies, and we raised 14 puppies by hand from day one, and raised every one of that litter. And
Wow.
She was right in there. We all fought over who got to feed Gus, because he wanted to eat right off the get-go, and he wasn't hard to eat or to get eaten. But anyway, so yeah, these wives put up with a lot of stuff and a lot of late nights. And a buddy of mine just reminded me, he said, "You remember that time we got stuck down in that meadow, and how'd we get a hold of your wife?" I said, "We had them business band radios, because we didn't have these cell phones, and stuff." And so she brought a chain and a tractor down there, rescued us. So anyway, so
yeah, that's pretty good. So I want to go back to Booker for just a moment, before because I want to hear about Gus and Bull and some of these other ones. But what kind of hunting style dog was Booker? What kind of mouth did he have, and etc.?
Well, he was one thing I think most people ever had a Willow Creek dog. Our dogs will go hunting. I mean, they go hunting, maybe a little too much hunting. If we've heard it once, we've heard it several times. I've been hunting my whole lifetime, and I ain't never treed up in there before. I don't know if it just craziness of just by chance, but Booker was a go hunting dog. Probably one of the things, and guess there's some Missouri fellas, Jesse Wheeler and Jeff McKnight and his son-in-law, but that dog had an uncanny ability. He was fully open. We got these great big irrigated cornfields, but that dog caught a lot of coon on the ground. And I don't know what kind of knack he had to do it, but he caught a lot of coon on the ground, had a beautiful mouth on him, good locate, nice tree dog, and just a real nice coon dog. I wouldn't say real flashy, but you're going to treat a coon when you took him hunting one way. You could wind a coon, could treat a lot of different, about any kind of coon, cold track, hot track, layup. And and we'd have probably taken him to hunts, Jason, but early on, his pups were just rocking and rolling at a year old, and I'd been at this long enough to go, why? I suppose it would have been a little bit more prestigious maybe for Booker and if we were in the stud dog business, but at that point in time in my life, I was thinking, raise these pups and go try to win hunts. And it didn't matter to me, the pups, titles don't make reproducers. And so to me, it didn't really matter that he didn't have a title, because we got a lot of the dogs. I titled a lot of dogs, why he was a young dog yet, and so that's really why he really never seen the hunts, because I was going with the dog. I guess Ike would have been one of the early ones, and Gus. And it's kind of funny. I think a lot of people in the coonhound world thought Booker was the son out of one of them dogs. They thought he was the son of one of his sons, because they were all Grand Nights and dual Grand Nights, and we hunted them all over the country in English days and everything. But Booker was the sire of all those dogs, and all the females that I mentioned were all females that came from this kennel.
Yeah.
So,
Well, whenever you told me that, it really drives home the fact that the dog don't have to have a title on it to make it a reproducer or make it a coon dog, and the title don't make the dog. That's for sure.
yeah, that's for sure. I mean, biggest thing is, well, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest blessings, to really tell you the truth, is that 25 years I told you that we were just having fun, pleasure hunting, and just keeping the best. I mean, a couple times Booker was the only pup of his litter. I think there was 2 pups, a male and a female, and the female got run over, and so it was down to Booker, and just a blessing. If something would have happened to him, we probably wouldn't even be talking now. So because we just would breed them dogs when they got older, it just was a thought, well, we better get some pups because, she's getting old or he's getting old. So that's and we just kind of kept score with the 22 for 25 years. And we weren't influenced by that monkey see, monkey do, we just knew what we liked, and we knew what tree coons where we lived.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I just think about that. And I guess, a lot of it is, I know y'all have a lot of coons up there, but even from where I'm at, a majority of the coon hunts are back east. So, and I'm assuming probably back in Booker's time, you probably didn't have a coon hunt every night of the week like you do now either.
Well, when things were kind of starting to roll there, the rumor mill always starts at, well, we heard those Willow Creek guys backdoor a lot of their dogs, and the guys, of course, that lived over here would laugh because our closest coon hunt was 2.5 hours away. So just think of that. If you live in Illinois or Indiana, if you would drive 2.5 hours one way to go to a coon hunt. And believe you me, they weren't waiting with open arms to let us win the hunt. And, there's not a lot of hunts and pretty highly competitive. And so, no, we didn't. It'd been nice to have a club. They started one about 45 minutes from us about a year ago, and that's kind of a nice deal. But no, other words, as the 80s went in the 90s, the coon hunting clubs just kind of dried up, and we just don't really have a lot of coon hunts in Nebraska anymore.
Yeah. So after Booker, what dog was you hunting next? I know it was a pup out of Booker, but what was it, Gus or?
Well, it was Gus and Ike were about the same, so we were hunting Gus and Ike, and then Ike's sister Sis placed at English Days, and it's just kind of a blur because I was just blessed at that time. We had about 4 or 5 dogs that it didn't really matter which one we took. They were all pretty nice dogs at the time, and so there really wasn't. I got a female. Pepper was the daughter of Booker and Summer, and so I was hunting some females too at that time. And I guess another side note that we were pretty proud of, we don't make too much of a deal, but Bull and Ranger's mother was on the reproducer list. So at one time we had a female and a male on the reproducer list. And so that was kind of cool. And that was I think there was like 4 or 5 title dogs out of that cross at Booker, and what do we call that female? Queen. That's so many dogs I can't remember all of them, but
I understand.
But anyway, she was a good reproducing female.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about the dogs, and whenever you've been doing it that long, it's I can imagine it's hard to even keep it all straight of what you had and stuff like that. But what is amazing to me is through these years that you've been doing this and breeding and raising these dogs, you still are producing good quality dogs that can go out and win pretty much at any level.
Yeah, I mean, I just got to go back to when and I know probably a lot of listeners probably I'm getting to be the old guy now, but there was just nothing like Platte Valley and Onis dogs as far as quality and standards. And one thing we don't really get caught up in much of the, these social media pages, and somebody will say something and you kind of get how it gets going and that. But we've just had a certain standard that was set by those guys at bar. And I guess I drilled that into my son, and we're just going to have a certain dog that sounds a certain way, or we're not going to have it. And we're just not going to, I mean, I might lose the hunt because I don't have this or I don't have that, but I will say one thing: when we pull a dog out, it's going to sound like a hound and look like a hound, or our definition of what they should look like.
Yeah. So, Bull, 2018's the year that you went to the world with him. Talk about Bull a little bit, kind of what kind of dog he is, and talk about that year of 2018 leading up and going to the world.
Okay, well, we started Bull and Ranger as puppies, and the first night in the woods, them dogs, they all just fired right up. And I mean, you'd always heard the stories about 5 and 6 month old dogs, but they're few and far between, and I'm kind of old school where, them are puppies. What are you doing hunting them? But I remember Bull was he must have been about 8 months old. We went down to the creek and had an old female named Daisy. They struck and run a coon hard about 3/4 of a mile and got treed. We had to get up out of the creek bottom and get around there, and he was on that wood just treeing every breath with her. I think we treed 4 or 5 that night. He went every step, and Ranger was just doing phenomenal too. And I think we had one called Wishbone too. And they were all just cranking. And a friend of ours, Darren Masson from Kansas, was looking for a young dog. And so we decided, well, we'll let Bull go. We can't do them all justice. So Darren's the guy that bought him as a started dog and kind of started getting him in some hunts, and wondered if we would take him that one summer and try to put title on him. I think we put a win or 2 on him, but Bull kind of that whole cross was really get deep, and Bull would just out hunt his staying power. He might get treed in there a mile, and he might stay treed 5 minutes or 5 hours. You just didn't know. And but he'd always have the coon. He checked, he'd have the coon, and Darren was hunting in some places that he had to walk, and there was no driving, and Bull might get in there where he couldn't get to him. And so we put some wins on him, and then Darren got him back, and I was just talking to Keel, and I said, if I could fix a couple things of that bulldog, I really think that dog has what it would take to win the hunts. And so I called Darren, and we struck a deal, and I mean, hats off to him. He had a nice young dog, but he said, you can do him more good, I think, than I can, John. So I got Bull up here, I guess, spring, and hunted him all that summer. And a gentleman that probably went on most of the hunts with me over the phone was a guy named Vic McMillan, who won a Lifetime Achievement Award 4 or 5 years ago at English Days. I had a dog called McMillan's Timberchuck, and just a great houndsman. And I'd pretty much narrate a hunt, and I hunted that dog. I hunted him really, really hard. And it came to first time I put him in was the Winter Classic, and he placed 3rd or 4th on Friday night. And then that just kind of started a run of took him to a qualifier in Missouri. I'm trying to think of the name of that town. It's a lake qualifier. Maybe you know which one it is. If you say the name, pretty big club down there, but it was a long drive. It was about 95 that day. And anyway, the first deal I got out of the gate, bull got treed and shut up, and it was a rock face, and where the coon had come to a face with some rocks and climbed up and went in, and he didn't stay. So I started in the hole, but then after that he got to rolling, and I think he treed 3 coons, got in there deep 3 times, got 3 coons, and that got us qualified. And then we went down to Miami, Oklahoma, to the zones, and fortunate to get through there, and then made it to Mount Gillon. But he was when you cut him loose, that dog was gone. And I always said he would tree one at 40 yards or 40 miles, but later on in his lifetime, we could have won a lot of hunts, but when you recut him off of that first tree, he was going to change zip codes. And that was detrimental sometimes because he just was too deep to hear.
Yeah, so when you recut him, he really turned the gears on.
Yeah, he would come out of the box, and he would never run. You know how some dogs, competition dogs, they might run over 5 tracks, just, we're getting out of here. And he was just never. Well, let me back up. One of the other things that he had that was annoying to me, it was kind of a blessing and a curse, but him and Ranger both had an internal clock, and when they'd hit a track when they were younger, in my opinion, they would call it too fast, if that makes sense to you. And which, you don't want them out there walling around forever either, but where I live, it's sandy, and coons are spread out, and that might be the only track. And as he got older, then said it earlier about Booker, but he was capable of treating any kind of coon track, from a cold grind it to a layup to a hot, whatever. And so that was one thing that he started grinding a little bit and treeing them tougher coons and not picking up and leaving. But back to he never ran over a track that I know of. He would get treed there, and he would tree with dogs, but when you made that cut, he wasn't going to, if you'd hunted around there. And that really was one of the things that kind of helped him in a lot of hunts that we won. When calves start breaking down and somebody's grabbing that tree or that, he would pick up and say, this coon can't be treed here. I got to go find him somewhere, find me one. So he would pick up and get out of there, like I said, when calves start breaking down. And I never did put him in a PKC hunt. We don't really have any around here, but I will say I had a lot of PKC guys ask me if I would sell that dog.
Yeah.
When he was younger.
Yeah, if he's like that, get through the country pretty accurate when he parks, I imagine so, because I hunt a lot of PKC, and that's what guys are looking for. One of them that will get in there and get treed and have a coon when you get there. Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing I don't. He puts it in. I'm really a guy that I can't stand a lazy dog. I got to have a dog, and I know with hunting we've got now with the deer hunters and land leases, a dog that hunts hard can get you into trouble. But my pet peeve is a dog that just doesn't fire when you cut them.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got one. I've got an English male dog out here, and he's wired 440. And when you cut him or recut him, he's ready to go both times.
Yep. Yeah. That's the kind of style I like, is a dog that I just always felt like I could do something more with a dog that done something, and have that kind of have gaminess. I mean, that's the one thing that I've been happy. Our dogs got gaminess to them. They might not be this or not, everyone be a world beater, but they all will do something. And I've sure owned some dogs over and seen dogs over the years that it's hard to train a dog, just don't want to do nothing.
Yeah. But, that's for sure.
That's a whole another deal though that I wanted to mention if we ever talk, because I think it's so important, and this is off the breeding. This is a little bit more of the training, but I really feel like if a lot of people, young guys getting in it, could read their dogs better, they'd have a lot better dogs. And what I mean is everybody gets kind of jacked up about that young dog that's starting good, but I'll promise you, I've seen more talented dogs get wrecked by too much hunting than not enough. Because the natural instinct of a human is like, boy, this dog's cranking, he's treeing coons, and you're hunting the snot out of him. And then all of a sudden he has a bad night. He might have another bad night. And the natural reaction is man, I got to get this dog. I got to hit him harder, man. He's not looking very good. And that's probably the time you need to lay him up for a couple of weeks. It's hard to do that when you got a nice young dog, but a lot of times that's all they need. They just get tired, just like if you're, having a 17, 18-year-old kid playing college football. Their body looks like they're ready for that, but they're just really not. And I just think for the patience that you show, you'll get rewarded on the end. You'll have a coon dog that can win a lot longer and stay at it a lot more.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think it's either been 2 or 3 weeks ago, I done a podcast by myself, and the title of it was Don't Frustrate Yourself and Don't Frustrate Your Dog. And that's exactly what I talked about having patience and not pushing a dog, especially a young dog. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty of a young dog turning on that, they flip that switch and it's exciting, and you get out there and you just start hammering and hammering and hammering and hammering, and then the dog starts looking like junk, and you get aggravated and think, well, I ain't pushing hard enough, and then you start pushing harder and it gets worse. And I've had to learn that lesson the hard way over the years, just from doing it. And so it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now we're having a deal, Keelan and I. We've got some really nice young dogs. Probably one of them, like, we're reloading, and we've got some really nice young dogs. But the conditions, it's terrible to try to hunt a young dog now. So you're kind of between a rock and a hard spot, because this is when a lot of bad habits can get started, when it's tough. And if you don't, like, we've got some real seasoned dogs that we can, measure the conditions with. You know what I mean? If you've only got 1 or 2 dogs, it's just hard not to get frustrated when they're not looking good. But even when old Grand Night champions are having troubles, what it's going to be like for pups.
Yeah, and I have a semen pup here out of Bluegrass Amos. She just turned 12 months old. And this dog's been running a track with another dog. Well, not even really with another dog. She don't care nothing about what another dog's doing. since she was about 4 or 5 months old. And, you know, I got really excited the first night she just kind of took off and started running a track. But this dog is yet to tree, and she started locating a little bit, but she's not really come on a tree yet like she should. And when we got super dry, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to get aggravated with her. She's going to be a dog. I'm not going to frustrate her. I'm going to put her up. And I started working on, you know, putting a better handler on her here in the yard and stuff like that, rather than putting her out there in conditions that I know she's not going to be successful in.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I would say about her, Jason, is you know, with being out of it for the Coonhound, the whole Coonhound world has really, really evolved in the last, I guess I'm knocking on 50 years of it. And you'd have to look at her pedigree. And here's how a conversation would go, let's just say circa 1985, 86. First of all, nobody in those days, you know, they told us young guys we were plumb nuts. You didn't take a dog hunt until they were about a year old. I mean, you just didn't do it. People would say you're crazy. And so the natural phone call with Buddy, well, didn't take him a pup. It didn't do much. And then the conversation would go, well, pup's going out, going with the other dogs, haven't heard them open yet. And then it would be heard them open, and, you know, and then kind of was at the tree, but hadn't really flipped over. But I guess what I'm saying, it was more of a methodical journey to get to that Coonhound. But I really think a lot of them dogs, though, you never had to wonder once you had them dogs finished in the 80s, 90s type of dogs, they were the same night after night. Or if you laid them up, you know, you didn't have to hunt them up. And it's just a different deal. I would say today modern Coonhounds are less junky and got more natural tree in them.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I used to hunt that line of dogs, the bluegrass Amos stuff way back when, and I hunted black and tans. Black and tans was my breed of choice for years. And I never really got to, you know, and this is something else I talked about on that podcast, was you click on Facebook and you see Joe Schmo over there's got a 6-7 month old dog that's about to make a Grand Night champion. First of all, they all don't do that, and second of all, everybody don't have that type of coon hunting. Where I'm at, that's not realistic. For me, right. I don't get too wound up if the dog ain't doing a whole lot by a year, 15 months old, especially like with her, because I kind of know the breeding a little bit. I know what to expect, you know, out of her, and she is a more track-minded dog than she is treated. I mean, I've turned probably 2 or 3 coons loose for her. And even in the wild, without turning them loose, she'll drive a track to a tree, and then she'll turn around and kind of about halfway backtrack it, and then turn around and go right back and then stop. And if you ease in there where she's at, she'll go right to a tree and put her feet on it. She'll never bark and get back down and kind of, you know, go back 100 yards or so and then turn around and come right back to it. And if you go in there and shine, she's got a coon. She just that switch just ain't flipped yet, and like I said, when it got bad dry, I knew for my benefit and for her benefit, you know what, there's no need to even get her all frustrated. We're going to have some rain come in here eventually. The tracks are going to get better. We're fixing to come into kill season here in Missouri, and you know, I'll be able to shoot some coons to her when she starts treeing here pretty soon. So, I don't get too wound up with that, and it's hard, and especially for young guys coming into the sport. You know, they see these dogs, walker dogs, especially. There's a lot of them on Facebook that's posted. That's, you know, a lot of guys, when especially in the walker dog breed, and maybe even some in the English breed, if they're not doing a whole lot by 12 months old, they're ready to send them down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But you know, over the years, for me is, I've seen a lot of them dogs that really are gangbusters that never, they're phenoms at 8 months old, but they're still that, you know, they're not the phenom when they're 5, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In other words, if you were like 12 years old and you beat everybody by 50 yards, that would be phenomenal. Everybody'd be going. But if you didn't run any faster and you were running against 22-year-olds, you see what I'm saying? What I'm saying is I've seen a lot of them dogs look really good, but then they never progress into greatness. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah. They come on real strong young, and then they never develop fully into what they could have been, and some of that could be like we were talking about. They come on, people are pushing them so hard, and hey, this dog's ready to rock and roll, so I'm gonna start running up and down the road, and 7, 8 month old, and I see it. I mean, I go to a lot of PKC hunts, and I'm hunting a 4-year-old dog, and a lot of times I'm hunting against 12-month or a little bit younger dog or a little bit older dog, and I'm thinking, the dog's nice, the dog can win, but are you really doing that dog justice? Long
well,
term.
Yeah, I think sometimes is when they're such young superstars, I think we overlook correction that we need to make, and we use the age as the excuse not to make that adjustment. Let's say adjustment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're like, he's only 6 months old. He'll get better. And I just think, that's some of the reasons some of them dogs never reach their full potential is they just never got it. They're allowed to get bad habits just because of their age. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you there. So, what dog that y'all have now? Is there a dog y'all have now that's pushing? I know I think a post somewhere Keelan had a dog named Bugle that he was hunting. Is that the dog you're pushing now? Or y'all got some other dogs, or where y'all
No, we've actually got some young dogs. We're really high on the young dog here that we call Deacon, and he's out of Cody Long's Breeze female, who's a Trailer 4 Cabin Creek Rowdy female. And big dog. And I've always been kind of partial, but a big dog with a huge mouth, and just showing tons of potential. That whole cross is really turning out. And then we got a little bit younger cross out of bull that we call that male Deacon or Demon. So Deacon and Demon. And he's out of a Gus daughter. And that was out of a Timber Tiger daughter.
Okay.
So,
and
that would be
the Deacon dog. Is that a litter mate to Cody's Fancy dog?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
He's litter mate.
I've not hunted with Breeze, but boy, I'm gonna tell you what, everybody that I've ever talked to about that dog says she's a really, really nice dog. I've hunted with Cody and Ringo. I've not had an opportunity to hunt with Fancy yet, but I've hunted with Cody and his Ringo dog. But they say that Breeze female is a really nice female, and it sounds like she's really reproducing well too.
Yeah, I think she is really reproducing well. And then we've got a couple promising, it's always been dueling dogs at this kennel with two full brothers, Ranger and Bull. And Ranger's really producing some nice dogs too. He's actually, I think, on or been on the reproducers list. Bull just a little short on pups yet. Of course, we were really hunting Bull, so we didn't breed him as much. And so there's some of them showing up. And then we've got another young male that's out of Copper, and Copper would have been a dog that I placed at English Days a couple times. That was a litter mate to Brandon Gaines' Rowdy dog. And we got him from Brandon as an outcross dog because we just felt like we were getting we needed to cross out, and so that's the dog we kind of chose to do that with.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like I said, I've not met y'all personally, but I follow Keelan on Facebook, and I'm gonna tell you what, he's got a little video of some pups that he took and put on there, and how he got those dogs to step up on those rocks the way he did when he took that video. That was, a matter of fact, I screenshotted that picture. That's the best that's the best picture of young pups I've seen. Them are some good looking puppies, and I don't know what cross they were out of, but they're definitely some good looking puppies for sure.
Well, on that note, I just think I really wanted to say that the good Lord blessed me with a good wife, and He blessed me with my only son who loves coon hunting, who's one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. And everybody dreams of their when they have a son that he's going to grow up to be a coon hunter, but Keelan's just been a real blessing. And I guess where I'm going with, he has got an eye for taking pictures of dogs and promoting them like no other.
Well,
and
he done a phenomenal job with that. I seen that video and I screenshotted it when I just waited for the video to progress, and when all those pups stepped up on those rocks, it was picture perfect. It was like a picture that should have been in a coon hunting magazine somewhere for pups are usually running around and wrestling and carrying on, and they just all walked up and stepped on those rocks, and I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Well, he took a couple pictures of Gus. Gus is a beautiful, beautiful dog, tricolored dog, and he took a picture of Gus up on a dog box and went on the tailgate. But we've literally had Coonhound and Foxhound deals ask if they could use that in their brochures and stuff. That picture of Gus he took. Sun was sitting behind him, and he's standing on top of the dog box. And yeah, Keelan just got a real knack for cattle or anything. As seeing that picture, and I'm more like, put that phone away. We're coon hunting.
Well, I try to, as a content creator and, with this podcast and stuff, I do take my share of pictures, but I will say I'm guilty of going into a tree and still being excited, when you go in there and your dog's treed and he's got a coon and, working on stuff with dogs, and I'm guilty of not taking my phone out when I probably should have, and taking pictures, and then taking pictures when I probably should be working on stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. But no, so I just want to give Keelan's and we had to, when I was hitting the hunts hard, Keelan was getting them started and doing the promotion, and I kind of got into the registered cows a couple years ago, and I'm kind of, everybody that knows me and knows I'm kind of an all or none kind of guy, and so I've really been focusing all my time and energy in the cattle, but a couple of these young dogs kind of got me excited, and I think maybe I got one more left in me. There's one hunt that's just been elusive. I'd like to place a dog at Autumn Oak sometime.
Yeah.
But everything else is kind of get crossed off the bucket list, and if it don't happen, it don't happen. But man, I've met a lot of great guys over the years, and had Leroy Penny come up and hunt, and like I said, hunted with Bert, hunted with Roger Preheim, Ed Loomis. These guys, some of these guys broke us young guys in pretty hard. Dennis Steinhauser and I are about the same age. We've competed against each other our whole lives, and good friend of mine. So it's been a real cool journey, and I've met a lot of great people. And the coon hunter, there's always a few bad apples, but for the most part, it's been a great experience. People I've met.
Yeah, and those, even for me, I think about back my first registered black and tan I bought, and the older guy I bought it from. The memories that when you can sit and think about those things are almost worth more than the experiences with the dogs. Really, with the people that you had the opportunity to meet through a sport of coon hunting.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think anybody my age will say, and I was really blessed because I got to live through the heydays that those late 70s and 80s of the coonhound world was something else. And even into the early 90s, and things kind of started changing as the fur price was going down in the late 90s and into the 2000s. But you know, we had a club called Lewis and Clark. It was only about 25 miles, and a couple of them years we had the Lewis and Clark Championship, hunted 85 dogs out of a club in Nebraska.
Yeah,
so
that's good. That's a good turnout for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just those were cool days. You go, your wives were in the kitchen, and and it's probably commonplace in Indiana and some of those places, but here we had coon hunts like that, to where we'd have our club meetings and who was going to run the kitchen, and there'd be bench shows start at 1:00, and we'd have bench shows and treeing contests and water races, and at least for us in this part of the world, those days are over.
Yeah. Well, and I think without a big hunt, it's probably over pretty much anywhere. And I've talked about this on the podcast. Like I said, I'm from Southeast Alabama, and I remember 14, 15 years old. Of course, I grew up on a farm. I've been driving since I can remember. And I'm not talking about just driving around the farm. Wasn't nothing for me to get in the truck and go to town, 10 years old and can't hardly see over the steering wheel. But we'd go to the Coon Club. It's 15, 20 minutes from where I lived. And, you'd get there, and they'd literally have breakfast cooked on Saturday morning, and it was an all-day affair. They'd be older men sitting around telling stories on the front porch. Some guys would bring their fiddle or their banjo and guitar, and they'd be playing music, and they'd have a treeing contest and a bench show, and then supper on the grounds, and then the night hunt. I mean, it was literally an all-day affair.
Well, Jason, on that deal too, to have a Grand Night champion in the late 70s or 80s, it was quite an honor. I mean, people would drive, if somebody had a Grand Night, people would drive for miles to go look at that dog. And then some of these Grand Night, people were advertising a lot then in those heydays. If there was a couple nationally advertised stud dogs at one of these hunts, they might have 6, 7 vehicles or more follow them out there, spectators.
Yeah. I'm almost young enough not to remember that, but I'm just barely old enough to remember that. A big stud dog there wasn't no Facebook. It was in a magazine that somebody seen.
Yeah, right.
The word got around that it was going to be at the club, and there would be guys from miles around come just to see that dog, or like you said, go out with the cast to spectate and hear that dog go.
Well, like there might be, it was difficult. You had to get 5 night champion wins to make a Grand Night, but you got to remember there might be 8 casts of night champions, and all you can ever do in a coon hunt is win your cast. If you start thinking, I got to score so much to win this hunt, I started winning a lot more hunts when I just started thinking, I got to win this cast. And then whatever happens after that. But I know Jesse Wheeler and Jeff McKnight had an old dog called Thunder. And I can't remember how many they told me night champion wins he had before he finished. He'd win his cast, but there'd be another night champion. You get 7, 8 more night champion casts, that starts making it a lot more difficult than
And for maybe a younger listener that's not familiar with what Mr. John's talking about, was back in the day, you had to have a first place on that dog to make him a Grand Night, and it was pretty tough to do sometimes.
Yeah, it was real tough because, there might be 25 night champions show up at a hunt, or 30.
Yeah.
And just winning your cast wasn't good enough. And even then, I know some dogs never made night champion because you had to have that 100 points and a first place win. And there's a couple dogs that first place win, they'd have like 120, 30, 50 points, but not that first place win.
Yeah, I remember guys saying, man, I just need one first place win, and they'd say they'd have 7 or 8 second place wins. They just couldn't get
Yeah.
that first place win to make it that night champion.
Yeah.
I remember guys, talking about that and it being tough to do, because it was, like you said, I mean, it was nothing, on a Saturday. Of course, it also helped that there wasn't a hunt every week too, and draw people
Yeah.
in. But we'd have 40, 50, 60 dogs show up on a Saturday night.
Yeah. There's one other thing hardly anybody talks about. When I started coon hunting, the hunts were 3 hours long. And so you could really tell the guys that were hunting their dogs, and dogs would start out like a house on fire. And I've never seen a dog yet that once they hit that wall, I've seen dogs that had all kinds of hustling, and once they hit that wall, they're done. Dogs that would be winning a cast, time you get to that third hour, then they might be underneath the pickup or something. But
yeah,
it took some endurance. I actually think the ACHA, I think some of them hunts were 4 hours in the early days.
Yeah, I tried to think back. Me and somebody had this conversation, and I can't remember if the first hunts I went to were 3 hours or 2 hours. I was right there along that time frame of when they changed, and I can't remember how long they were back then.
Yeah, no, I don't remember, but then they went to 2, and of course now most of them are an hour on.
Yeah,
which a lot of that stuff has changed the makeup of breeding of coon dogs, I think.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we're definitely breeding for a different style dog than what was bred for, several years ago. Just and and even now, 5 years ago we were breeding for, one way of a dog, like a big ambush style, big hunting style dog, and now with the influx of people moving out into the country and farms getting broke up and sold off, I think we're starting to see a swing back the other way where you more have a dog that would, for lack of a better term, almost squirrel hunt some woods out instead of blowing the country.
Yep, that little female called Summer was out of Booker and a Rolling Rock, and she was one of them real thorough. She might tree a coon off to the right, and dogs are already in there quarter, half mile deep, and she just was one of them thorough, which I think, like you said, that style to win hunts is going to come back, that you're going to have one that doesn't run that far before it settles down hunts, because them hour-long hunts, that's puts you at a disadvantage if that dog already got one treed before your dog even settles down to go hunting.
Yeah, I mean, just about now, if you got one that'll tree 2 coons pretty quick, you can just about get ready. You're going to the winner's window at the end of the night. If you got one that can tree 2 coons pretty quick, especially here where I'm at in my country, if you got one that can tree 2 coons pretty quick here, you can pretty much bank you're going to be the winner of the cast. Because those.
Well, the thing is, Jason, if you can get that dog recut while you're walking to the other 3 that are all split in different directions, you're just hoping sometime you can listen back and get your dog treed again while that's the thing. You're walking in 4 different directions, and that hour's up by the time you get all the dogs scored once.
Yeah, and that's another reason you don't see those big scores. I mean, for one, we're only hunting an hour, but for 2, we're going in an hour. You're possibly looking at 4 to 6 coons in an hour, because every dog split up and they're treeing their own coon, and one of them's going to tree an extra one, or maybe 2 of them tree an extra one. So I mean, you're looking at a bunch of coons. It's just dogs are split up, and you're usually hung there at that quarter strike after the first dump.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
So I've already kept you over an hour, and I told you about an hour, and I want to stick to that. But real quick before I let you go, you mentioned that you had some semen collected on Booker. Do you collect semen on all your stud dogs? Is that a practice that y'all follow, and have y'all used that and been successful with it?
No, we really haven't. We've collected a little bit on bull, but just Booker. We went to English Days and Dean Bitzel, I believe, God rest his soul, I think he passed away. But we went right by there, so we had Booker collected. And just because of it, yes, I think the dog was special. I think he'll be special down the road, but not really. To answer your question, we don't, because we're just kind of always moving forward, if that makes sense. Trying to make a better one.
Yeah, and no, I get it, because it sounds like especially with the start of Booker, it sounds like that's kind of the direction you went. I didn't know if that was a practice y'all follow, and I didn't know if y'all had used any of that stuff that y'all have gotten collected, whether it be on Booker or some of the others, and have been successful with it and seen some of the same results.
We did use it on we kind of had a special female. She was a Oakwood Diamond that's in the Hall of Fame. She was double diamond bred, a big bitch, good mouth, and we tried to inseminate her last spring, but she didn't take. So we're going to try. We got 3 more breeds. We actually used 2 because we were so sure that we'd get her stuck, but it didn't happen. But we're going to try it again if we get the right female. But right now, and then something I didn't mention, we just kind of our deal was, we didn't, since we lived where we live, we just felt like it would be better for us not to stand the stud dogs. And we've had people that said, they'd stand them for us and in more central locations, but we just kind of tried, if you want a Willow Creek dog, there's one place to usually get it, and that's at Willow Creek.
Yeah.
And we'd have probably been different if we didn't live in northeast Nebraska. We maybe would have done something different and stood our dogs, but we're mainly ranchers, and that really wasn't our deal. Just like I said, this whole deal was just a blessing that came about. That wasn't really planned. I mean, always try to keep good coon dogs and stuff, but again, like I said, all it took was a guy coming by telling me that dogs were scoring 1,800 points and treeing everywhere, and our dogs were nice, but they couldn't win a hunt. And if you know me, don't say that I can't do something.
Yeah, no, I understand. I kind of got a little bit of that in me as well, so I definitely understand.
That was the motivation to get started and stuff, but I just always want to be able to go out there and unsnap a good English dog that's got a good mouth that can get a coon treed. Like I said, we try to raise them. This is where we hunt, so we know what trees coons here, and if we can slip off somewhere else. And I think on that bulldog, one other thing, since Cody was kind of, when he was thinking about breeding Breeze, that dog won a hunt or cast in 13 different states.
Yeah.
Bull did.
And was one of the cast in Colorado?
Yeah, he was a high scoring dog at an RQE in Colorado. Yeah, he won a cast, 800 and some points, and basically they just said, you're on the Platte River here, John, there's 40 minutes to hunt, but if you want to keep him on the leash and walk out of here, you're sure welcome to, because we hate to see your dog get lost out here. But yeah, one was a Colorado, he was a South Dakota state champion. Yeah, 13 different states that he's won a hunt. And so
yeah, that's pretty impressive for sure.
It's it might not sound like much, but try it sometime with the dog.
Yeah. Well,
the other thing, he traveled really good. Some dogs just don't travel very good, but he traveled really good.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He must travel pretty well to be able to do that.
Yeah, he traveled pretty well. He was always ready to go no matter where we went. So anyway.
Well, Mr. John, I have kept you a little bit over what I agreed to, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Keelan had reached out to me about this, and me and you had talked, and I got busy with work and stuff, and I'm glad we were able to get this lined out, and maybe, you know, I can venture up that way one day and meet y'all in person and shake your and Keelan's hand, or bump into you at a hunt somewhere. That would be awesome. But I really truly thank you for being on the podcast and sharing your story with us, and kind of where these Willow Creek line of dogs come from.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and just want to thank you for doing this. This is the way we got to keep the young people, and I also want to mention, Jason, if anybody hears this podcast and is trying to connect some dots that maybe an old fart like me might be able to help them with, by all means, they can get a hold of me, and I'll try my best. But like I said, I'm 64 now, and I started this when I was 13, so I've met a lot of interesting people and kind of know a lot of dogs and hunted with a lot of. That's the crazy thing. I've hunted with almost all them dogs in our dog's pedigree. Yeah,
well, that kind of helps to know what you're going to be getting at it when you're breeding a dog, for sure.
The last thing I'll leave you with is, I always said, put a pedigree up on the wall, put a blindfold on, and throw a dart. And if you're doing things right, you can't miss hitting a coon dog in that pedigree.
Yeah. Well, I would say y'all been successful at it, for be doing it this long, and to have dogs that consistently tree coons and can consistently go out and win, and pretty much win in any state. 13 states, one dog. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Again, it's just the good Lord blessed us, and we're just trying to take what He blessed us with and enjoy Him while we're here on this earth.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's about in the end, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Jason.
Yes, sir. You have a good evening, and thank you again, Mr. John.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, guys, for listening to the Coonhound Collective podcast today. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to listen to the podcast. If you don't mind, head over to Facebook and give us a like, and head over to Instagram and give us a follow. It's both at the Coonhound Collective. Also, if you would like to reach us here at the Coonhound Collective, you can reach us at thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. If there's someone that you would like to hear on the podcast, or a product that you would like to hear talked about, please send it to thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. Thanks again. Have a great day.